Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to the Changing Attitudes, Changing Responses, It's Not Right for Neighbors, Friends, and Families for Older Adults conference and community. We are all about community, so welcome to all of you. We're going to do a lot of introductions, but first of all, we wanted to have you hear directly from the Center for Research and Education on Violence Against Women and Children, directly from the Community Director, Barb McQuarrie, who has some opening remarks and welcoming statements for you. And also, I'd just like to acknowledge that Barb's 30 years in the abuse prevention field to make things better for women and children has been acknowledged in an Order of Ontario.
Thank you. I just want to bring greetings from the Centre on behalf of our entire team, the academic director, the learning director, our Centre manager, our students, and our administrative staff. We're really very, very happy to be here. As many of you know, this is a culmination of almost 3 years' work now. And it's work that's really being developed and grown and incubated in the community of practice. And I know that Alison later is going to be introducing you to the entire community of practice. But I just want to say how much we appreciate having this group of people take this subject on and really explore new ways of looking at it. And I think we've developed new perspectives and new learnings. I think that my expectation of the next 2 days is that we're going to use what we've learned so far in the project as a foundation for continuing and deepening that learning. So I want to invite you all into that process. I want to thank our funders, Employment and Social Development Canada, through the New Horizons program. We wouldn't have been able to do it without that financial support. I want to thank Heather Reed and her team who have helped to manage getting you all here and organizing the conference. I also want to let you know that we're very fortunate to have a reporter from the Toronto Star, Carol Gore, is in the room, and she's going to be with us, learning along with us, reflecting, and she may be wanting to talk to you at some point. So that's all I had to say. Thank you for being here, for being part of this experience, and I look forward to meeting you and talking to you as the conference unrolls.
Thanks, Barb. I can't tell you how exciting it is to see you all here. We started with a community of practice that Barb mentioned 3 years ago, and there were 30 people in that group. Could I just ask those people now that are actually here today to stand? People who came to London 3 years ago. So thank you. Because what we've been doing together, Margaret's been our fearless leader, but we couldn't have done any of what we've done without all of us. So we are a community, and we intend to continue to be and grow that community. So welcome to the other 90 of you that are here. And just let's also keep in mind the people that couldn't get here, because we know that this program has touched the lives of many people. So just a little bit about who we are, and we'll do some more introductions and good mornings before we actually move into the day. So my name is Alison Leaney, for those of you that don't know me. I am from BC, and I've been in this field for about 20 years, and I've been very blessed to work with many of you, and looking forward to getting to know those of you that I don't know yet. I've worked locally, regionally, provincially, nationally, and some of you may know that at the international level, this is the 10th anniversary of World Elder Abuse Awareness Day on June 15th. And so a number of us have been taking that internationally UN proclaimed day to work and raise awareness at the local level. So yeah, I've been very blessed to work at all those levels, and I think one of the most meaningful parts of my life at work has been working with the people in this field. So that's me, and I'm the national trainer for the It's Not Right Neighbors, Friends, and Families for Older Adults initiative. And this is my friend and colleague, who needs no introduction, Margaret McPherson.
Thank you. So I'm Margaret, and I have been also very blessed to be part of this project. Right from the very beginning, my very first phone call that I made with the community of practice to say, so what do you want, what are we going to do together? The reception that I got was so warm and so inviting that I immediately felt comfortable with suggesting we try things that, might be scary. But for the most part, we have really pushed each other in our thinking and in our practices, and we have learned together in ways that I have dreamed about since I was a little kid, because I really believed that we do so much better together than alone, and we have a lot to learn about how to be change agents, how to create the world that we want. And I have never been part of a group like this where it was so immediately apparent that that's what we were going to do together. So everything you're going to see over these next 2 days has grown from that very first conversation with this amazing group of pioneers and trailblazers who come from all over the country. And so I feel extremely blessed to be with them and to be working with them. I've worked in this project as the project coordinator. And even though the funding is coming to an end on the project, we have no intention of stopping. So, we'll figure it out as we go. It's kind of like that when you're, making things up and figuring things out. There's not a clear path forward. So, I welcome all of you to be part of the adventure with us from here on out, because, it's like it says somewhere on the banner that you can't see, but it's there. It says we all have a role to play, and every one of you is such an important part of this conversation. So,
Thanks.
yeah.
So Margaret and I are going to be sort of the tag team MC team throughout the next 2 days, trying to keep us on track and on time track. And there's a clock running here.
Yes.
And we're going to be learning more about that throughout the day. And I'm hoping I'm not the first one to be remiss.
When you have the green light, we're good. When we get to the red light,
Okay.
people at the back start going like this.
Okay, I get it. Okay. So thanks a lot, Margaret. So welcome to all of you. We wanted to have an opportunity to also introduce a few other people that have been involved and are going to be supporting our work throughout the next couple of days. So if I could just ask Ben Cottle and April Struthers to just stand so people know who you are. They are going to be coming up later. They are our esteemed evaluation team, and we have a number of activities planned for throughout the workshop or the conference as well, to keep furthering our evaluation and our learning together. To my right, I also wanted to introduce Lisa Sorsa, who's, as you can see, a graphic artist. Increasingly, it's been extremely powerful for me, and probably many others, to go to events where there's a graphic representation of the high points of what's happening in the room. And so Lisa is going to be working to capture that throughout the day, and today and tomorrow. So thanks a lot for that, Lisa. And please feel free to go and take a look and see what you think about what's happening over there. I also wanted to give you a chance to, so I'm going to be learning to run this new mic or not a mic, a mouse that's going in a different direction.
So we have to go to the PowerPoint. Yep. I just saw myself on the screen. It's a shocking thing to see yourself.
So because we are all about relationships and, you know, we are all neighbors, friends, and family members, we wanted to just give you a couple of minutes to say good morning to the neighbors, friends, and maybe you'll find some family members in the room, to just say hello this morning and to do that in like a couple of minutes and maybe say hi to someone you haven't met because we want to know everybody by the time we leave. So like 2 minutes, really quickly, say good morning.
The other thing I was going to say is suggest that every time they get up to a break and come back, they sit with different people.
Yeah. Where's the mic on the floor? Is it out here?
It's back there.
Okay. I
See
couldn't
where Garrett-
believe it. All of a sudden it was 8:23.
I know.
I was up. I've been up since.
I had no
6.
doubt.
So is that long enough?
Yep. Because we need to pay attention to this clock.
Okay. So thank you. So the other thing about being in community and knowing one another and developing relationships, which is what we're all about, is recognizing that mostly we have a lot of things in common, but we also celebrate diversity. And that is what makes us wiser, richer people and communities. And we started recognizing that one of the things that we'd like to acknowledge is that there probably are a number of people here who have a different first language than English. And so we'd like to invite you to come up to the mic, to go back to the mic, actually, right back there, to say good morning to us in your first language. So if someone has already said good morning in your first language, maybe for the sake of time, we could have one person per language.
And good morning, that's it. You're on our clock.
Good morning. صباح الخير.
Thank you.
Bom dia.
Thank you.
Bon matin à tout le monde. Buenos días a todo el mundo.
Is that it? Mm-hmm. Thank you. Good morning. Welcome. So there's a few other things that I wanted to just get a sense of in the room because there's people from a lot of different places here. So I'd like to have you stand so you can see and also to keep us all moving energy-wise throughout the day. How many of you are from north of 60? So from northern Canada, please stand. Yay to the north. How many people are from the west or the prairies? So BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, please stand. Yay! How many of you are from the beloved Atlantic provinces? Woohoo! And how many of you are from Ontario or Quebec? Woohoo! So we are working to create a pan-Canadian approach. So I would say we have many of the right people in the room. The other thing I wanted to do was just get a sense of the different sectors, people from different sectors that are present. So if I could just ask you to stand again, and you might stand more than once, right? Because we do seem to all wear, many hats that we're going to take off right after this exercise. How many of you are police or work in victim services? Please stand. Right on. How many of you are from the Violence Against Women movement? So you work in a shelter or older women's support groups? Right on, welcome. How many of you are from government? Any level of government? We are so happy you're here. And I mean it. You know I mean it. How many people work in the health service sector? Health. Right on. How many of you work in the nonprofit sector serving older adults, so nonprofit organizations? Fantastic, you guys. How many of you work in a multicultural organization? Right on. How many of you work in an Aboriginal organization? Welcome. Okay. How many of you are representing an elder abuse committee or network, a community response network, or the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse? Wow. Well, give yourselves a hand. Okay, just a couple of other quick announcements. Washrooms are around the corner to the right and around the corner again. We will be having half-hour breaks in the morning and the afternoon. We're going to try very hard to stick to that because the great thing about being together in person is you actually get to talk to people more than, and actually see them at the same time as you're talking to them. So we are going to try to stick to that. You may have noticed from all the equipment in the room that this conference is being videotaped. The videotaping will be focused on the people on the stage. And if anything else is captured, it could be the back of your head. So if you have concerns about that, and I understand some people may, the best place to be is at the back of the room. So just wanted to let people know that. We want to have the conference proceedings so that more people can, that are here with us in spirit, can actually participate by seeing it later. I think for any of you that were wanting to have simultaneous translation, you probably found out about that at the registration table. If you haven't, please go to the registration table because we do have simultaneous translation in the room. We also have resource tables over to my left. I would really encourage you to go check all that out. People brought a lot of great materials, lots of organizations and new initiatives that are represented over there. So check that out at the breaks. And also you notice on the far right that there's, you're going to hear more about it later, but there's a very long piece of brown paper that's going to be full of all your thoughts and ideas. So we will be working with that as well. And I think that's most of the housekeeping that I wanted to share with you. And also, just so you know, we are having dinner together. So you might not have known that, but we are having a cash bar at 6 and dinner together tonight and tomorrow night at 6:30. So in case you're wondering about where you're going to go to eat, because I have that question quite a lot of the time. It's all taken care of for you, and I think it's actually we're very fortunate because it allows us to continue this container of being together. So I have an invitation for you. The Neighbors, Friends, and Families initiative is a human being approach. It's about noticing as a neighbor, friend, or family member that there may be something happening of concern for an older person in our lives. And so because our approach as bystanders is a human being approach, now that I've got you all to identify all your hats, we're inviting you to take them all off for the next 2 days and actually be here for all of who you are as an individual, because that's really what we're going to be focusing on, working with. And it might actually be a rest, because he looks pretty stressed out.
Okay, so we need to go to the, okay, they just didn't have the deck up.
Okay. So I wanted to tell you a bit about the It's Not Right Neighbors, Friends, and Families for Older Adults initiative, and then say a little bit about where we're going for the next 2 days. So many of you recognize that this is the opening slide from a television ad that aired, I think, across the country. Does it look familiar to people? Yeah. And, you know, at first I was thinking, how is this going to get the discussion going across the country? And I think it was incredibly effective. In my own life, my parents have friends who I think are actually being financially abused by someone in their family, and they actually saw this ad, and it made a difference in their lives. So, so my initial wondering what the impact would be has been replaced by, wow, is that ever a powerful tool? So this ad was one of the number of initiatives that was engaged in by the Federal Elder Abuse Initiative that was 4 government department-led ministries from across Canada. And it is the place that the Neighbours, Friends and Families It's Not Right for Older Adults initiative emerged. And at this time, I'd like to just acknowledge a friend and colleague of many of us, Susan Crichton, who couldn't be here today because it's her little girl's birthday. It was a very tough decision, but I guess that's that human being approach, being at home with your daughter. She saw Margaret present the It's Not Right Neighbours, Friends and Families that has been used in the violence against women movement and said, we need that for older adults. And so that really was the beginning of the It's Not Right campaign for older adults. And it was part of the Federal Elder Abuse Initiative. So, as Barb mentioned, our project has been a 3-year New Horizons project. And it engages bystanders to take action, and by bystanders we mean neighbors, friends, and family members, and overcoming the hesitation that sometimes we feel to help. So it's about engaging bystanders and changing social norms, which we will be talking a lot more about. Based on the work that Margaret and others at the center did in identifying what the key things were that people who are bystanders or neighbors, friends, and family members in domestic violence situations, we used that as a starting place, right, to help shape what a bystander approach, neighbors, friends, and families approach should be or would need to be for older adults. And so what came from that, and connecting with the community of practice and getting advice from people involved with the Canadian Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, was some core content. So a set of slides that can have a video clip story added or not, that can be tailored to whatever amount of time someone might have to be able to go and raise awareness with people who are neighbors, friends, and family members about what they can do if they see someone who is possibly experiencing abuse or neglect. So we realized that some of you might not have seen that core content, and so we will be at lunch across the hall, probably after you grab your lunch, because it's a buffet lunch. We invite anybody who would like to know exactly what the core content is to come and join us just across the hall.
I just want to point out.
And I have 11 minutes to finish quite a lot.
I know.
Okay, thank you. So we have core content. And what we didn't get to do initially with the first set of core content that was developed under the Federal Elder Abuse Initiative was actually to roll it out across the country. And so that's what our project the last 3 years has been about. We have actually delivered workshops, full-day workshops to train people to present the core content in all 10 provinces and 2 territories. So that is something that we have done, and it is about preparing presenters. Some people also have facilitation skills, so we've provided some support there. As I mentioned, we are using a bystander approach and a social norms approach. And even though the core content is directed at neighbors, friends, and family members, there's a lot of relevant material in it that for people who are working in professional settings. We realized, again, based on your domestic violence experience, and I think many of us know this, that people's stories are really what get the point across to people about what actually people are experiencing, the harm that's happening. And so with Margaret's leadership, there have been 10 people's stories developed, and they are representative of people experiencing harm or causing the harm that are, men and women, people of all different backgrounds. And they do include not only a little 1 or 2 minute scenario, but also responses to, so a less supportive or a more supportive response. Most of the scenarios focus on early intervention, so when warning signs and risk factors first start to appear. The learning outcomes for the core content, and actually for people who are being trained to become presenters, are these things. So these are what we consider to be the key ingredients. So they are to be able to assist people to recognize warning signs and risk factors of abuse and neglect, to recognize the important role that ageism as a social norm plays in driving abuse and neglect circumstances. It's about recognizing, starting to see and understand the impact of abusive behavior. It's about how to have, as a neighbor, friend, or family member, once we recognize warning signs and risk factors, how to have a supportive conversation that leaves the door open to support. And we call that a see it, name it, check it, or a sync it conversation. And it's also about people having information about community resources. So the social norms that we are taking on this project are that there is this idea out there that we're supposed to mind our own business. So we are directly challenging that and saying that if someone's experiencing harm, we need to challenge that. There's also a social norm that, we can think, well, there's bad things happening, but there's nothing I can do about it. We're trying to challenge that as a social norm. And we're trying to challenge ageism as a social norm, the idea that aging diminishes our value. The bystander approach is about how there's something that we all have a role to play, and that small actions are really important and can make a huge difference in people's lives. So that's what the core content is about, and that's what we're, assisting people to learn how to present to people who are neighbors, friends, and family members. And then the rest of our one-day workshop to train people is really to give them some hands-on personal experience of a lot of these concepts to make it easier to present it, basically. So you've heard that we do have a community of practice, and we have been what I would call a learning community, that we need all of us to keep unpacking and keep learning how best to do this more and more effectively. And we keep refining the materials over time. So what you're going to see in the next 2 days is a lot of the materials, the video clips in their final version. Or their final version, and we're going to have an opportunity to keep learning, sharing what we've learned so far, but also seeing this event as a learning event. You all have in your conference folder the brochure on the right, which is a consolidated version of the other 3 brochures, and it's really helpful for people to have in presentations that you might give on the core content. So I want to turn it over to Margaret.
So we're going to look at, we want to look at the problem in bigger than just, a problem between individuals. And this is the World Health Organization's ecological model. And what they say is that if we're going to be successful in prevention, we have to consider sort of the interplay between different layers in our lives. So we start with the individual. That's kind of the center, right? For each one of us, though, it will look slightly different as you move out. The relationships around you, the community that supports those relationships, and then the broader social issues, like social policy and oh yeah, so I'm going to go totally blank. What can I say? Every now and then my mind just goes, okay, that's enough, take a break. But larger social issues, the constructs, social norms are part of the societal level. And so over the next 2 days, we're going to we're going to look at abuse that happens in relationships, but we're also trying to create a bigger picture where we can see this just doesn't happen between people. There are lots of forces that are at play that converge, because we really need to shift the discussion away from there are good people and there are bad people. There is only us. And so part of what we are going to do is implicate you with us in seeing how our attitudes and behaviors and social policies and systems actually all work together to either make violence in relationships more likely or less. So that's the World Health Organization. So we will focus a lot on the individual, right? But there will always be these other layers that we're pointing to. You want me to? Sure. So U-Power, what is it, right? It's this idea that you are a powerful being in the world. Most people just don't know it. Think about the smallest thing think about something, sometimes somebody said something mean to you. How long did that last? How deeply did that impact you? At the same time, think about a kind act where somebody said something kind to you and how long, what a difference that can make. This is a different kind of power that we're talking about, where even your smallest action has an impact. And so if that's true, then what choices do you have? And what choices do you make? So do you want to talk about the clickers?
Sure. So you guys have a little white thing. Most of you have a little white thing that has a bunch of buttons on it. If I could I think there may not be quite enough for the whole crowd. Yeah, so share. Right. So these are, hello. If I could just explain, so these are a technology, don't be freaked out by it. It's actually, I figured out how to do it, so it's straightforward. And it's an opportunity for us to get a sense very quickly in the room about how people are thinking and feeling about different questions. And so, so what you do is you match whatever your individual response would be to the A, B, C, or D that you would find on your clicker. So the first question is, how powerful are you? A, I can move mountains. B, I can move a small hill. C, I can move a wheelbarrow. D, I can move a potted plant. A potted plant.
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 Not a pot plant. A potted plant. I'm just saying. Oh, it's a typo. Potted plant.
Yes.
Potted plant. So you see, adapt. We made this at 11 o'clock last night. I'm just saying.
So choose your selection, right? Pick A, B, C, or D.
And you can share them. So they're set up so that if somebody at your table doesn't have a clicker, just give them the clicker when you're done with it.
Okay, has everybody had a chance to vote?
No, they're still voting. So just give it another. You won't feel anything. Like if you're sitting there going like this, you won't feel anything. You just press the button that you want, and no one will know that you pressed it.
And
right?
you can change your mind.
And you can don't change your mind.
Like if you hit the wrong one by mistake.
All right, okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Okay, I think we should.
Okay.
Okay. So are you ready? This is like instantaneous. Look at that. So this is what people are thinking and feeling in the room about how powerful are we? Okay, are you ready for the next question? It's kind of fun, eh?
Yeah, but we got a minute.
I know, we have a minute. I think it's my fault. Okay, so knowledge. So your knowledge about abusive older adults. A, I have a high level of knowledge. B, I have a modest level of knowledge. Or C, I am just learning about the issue. So choose A, B, or C. Okay?
I'm going to stand closer to the mic.
Yeah. Okay, so we have people who have different, they've had different experiences with this issue. That's fantastic.
It's part of what makes the work so interesting, right, is the mix of people.
Okay, third question. I know someone. I personally know an older adult who may be experiencing or has experienced abuse or neglect. Or B, To my knowledge, no one I know has experienced abuse or neglect.
Look at how quickly they vote now. You are excellent.
Whoops.
Oh, Al!
Oh, did I just screw it up?
Okay, it's okay. It's all right. It's all right. Okay, we know. I know.
I went backwards.
She went backwards. Okay, you know what? In the interest of time, we're just going to keep going.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
See, but this is actually, we planned it this way because it's really important that you don't think that we think we're perfect, because we're not.
I'm still learning how to use this mouse. So we'll get to do that throughout the day, and I'll try to keep it together. So what we wanted to do now is give you just like a couple minutes very quickly to talk to your neighbor. And what I'd like you to talk to your neighbor about is what are the kinds of things that you do when you sense that there's someone who's having a hard time and that they seem to be in trouble? Are you a person that rushes in to solve the situation, or are you a person that wants to feel much more comfortable avoiding? So what is your normal, your default? Because I think, although there's variability, we probably all have a default.
If you pick it up and hold it,
Yeah?
I think you'll be more comfortable.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
I don't usually use it.
Don't worry about it.
I usually use arrow keys.
Oh, well, you can do that. We're pretty much done this. We're over time, but we're not too bad. So maybe bring them back. Al, can I do it? Can I unpack it?
Yeah.
Because I'm going to use my fast voice.
Yeah, go ahead.
that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we'll come back together now. So I want to say that, there's not a good and a bad end of this. Think about it like a continuum. And it's true that likely, depending on the situation, you may be at one end or the other. But the fact of the matter is, you have a general orientation, and really that's all we're starting with. We just want you to have a sense about where do you think you start from when there's trouble, right? So there's an upside and a downside. The downside of avoiding is, that you're likely avoiding the situation, turning your head the other way. But the upside goes toward, maybe you're respecting people's privacy. Maybe you're sitting back, trusting that they have what they need to be able to solve the problem. At the other end of the scale, in solving it, the problem is, the downside is that you might be doing to and for another person, deciding what's good for them. The upside is, we appreciate solving problems in our community, in our world, really. And so the thing that we want to do is focus on the being with. So how do we learn to be with people in a way that is respectful and supportive to them? So here's the next clicker question. Are you a solve it person or are you an avoid it person? And for all of you going, Margaret, I need a C. No, there's no C. I just want you to pick, where do you think you tend toward? Which side of the equation? No, I'm sorry, there'll be no C. Yeah. Okay, is everybody in? Couple more. And make sure you share your clickers. Okay, so we'll have a look and see sort of where we line up. A couple people still coming in. Going, gone. Okay, so this is what the picture looks like across the country. We are a country of solve-it kinds of people. And as I said, it has an upside and a downside, and we'll look at that over the next 2 days together. That's all we're going to say about that now. But I just want you to remember this graph because we'll refer back to it, and you know who you are.
So what I'd like to do now is introduce our first keynote speaker. Our first keynote speaker is Dr. Alan Berkowitz, and some of us had a chance to meet Tim for the first time last night. Dr. Berkowitz is internationally renowned for his groundbreaking work in social norms and bystander approaches. He's consulted with by many people throughout the US and the world. He's well known for his scholarship and innovative programs addressing issues of substance misuse, sexual abuse, gender violence, bystander intervention, and diversity. He's going to talk about his work, and he'll be speaking about bystander intervention theory, research and skills, and how we can keep learning together about how to apply social norm and bystander approaches to the field of abusive older adults. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Alan Berkowitz.
Bonjour, good morning. Nice to be here. On behalf of myself and my wife Beatrice, we want to tell you that we love Canada, that every time we come across the border, like something feels different to us. And we love the US, but there's also some refreshing things about Canada, let's say, in contrast. And what we see here really exemplifies that you're really doing amazing, groundbreaking work with a lot of deep thinking. So we want you to know that it's a great honor, spelled with a U, to be here. Okay? Someone gave me your brochure on being least intrusive, so I thought we'll bring that back to the US and maybe send it to our government. Okay, so I wanted to share something which is, yesterday we looked again at all the scenarios that you've developed, which are really powerful, and the responses, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I couldn't sleep, and I realized if you look at the issue of colonization, which we're all struggling with the after effects of that, especially our Aboriginal communities, and you think of our Aboriginal communities as our elders. For example, on the border we have the Dakotas and the Lakotas, and they say that the white buffalo woman came to them 20,000 years ago. So if there are elders, you can replay all your scenarios and you could see everything in there as a portrayal of colonization, of taking something that doesn't belong to you, of taking more than you have right to ask for it. To me, it really shook me up. So I lost a few hours sleep, but it was worth it. The other thing is, if you think of the planet Earth as our mother, and look at what we're doing to her, it's elder abuse. She's our elder. So I think there's something about this issue of elder abuse that pushes really deeply into some very profound human questions. And so we'll have the opportunity to explore those together. And now if I can figure this out, we'll go to the PowerPoint. And by the way, like many speakers, you realize you were trying to do too much in too short a time. So the handout that you have is longer than what I'm going to do here. Okay? So we're going to talk about the big picture and some reflections. We're going to talk about the bystander issue and the social norms issue. And when I talk about social norms, I'm going to focus on a particular way, which is how you perceive the norms. So for example, when we did the clickers and you said, how much knowledge do you have? You could ask people to say, how much knowledge do you think most people in this room have? And then if you see that most people think that everyone knows more than them, that says something about the group, right? I have X knowledge, but everyone has more knowledge, and everybody feels that. Everyone feels less knowledgeable compared to everyone else. So The social norms approach is about revealing what we call misperceptions that influence people's behavior. And when we take on this issue of elder abuse, we can see that there may be a lot of misperceptions in our communities about whether or not people should intervene, whether or not people are worried about someone. And part of social change is correcting the misperceptions, which in turn will change some of the unhealthy norms. And what we learned in the US is, in the violence against women work, is that the social norms approach and the bystander approach are, let's say, synergistic, that each one is more powerful together than either one alone. So what I'll be proposing is that we can think about how they're synergistic and work together. And then just talk about different skills that we can use. And then if there's time to talk about, it's not advancing, to talk about some case studies. So now I need some help because it seems to be when I press this, it doesn't advance the slides. Yeah. Nope, it's not on there. So I'm just going to keep going and then we'll catch up the slides. So I wanted to talk about some of the caregiver issues, some of the underlying issues, and one of them is the relationship of ageism to ableism, because I think to me these two are profoundly connected. And a lot of what we look at as ageism is based on an assumption of what is a person who has ability or who is able. And if we're really attached to the physical body as the value of our existence, then as the physical body becomes less able, then the person becomes less valuable. So there's really kind of a philosophical assumption about who we are, which will be the subject of the closing talk by Beatrice, that I think really we need to see how these two things, ableism and ageism, are connected. The other thing, so then we talk about what gives value to a person. And if we define that in a material way, then obviously the aging process results in a person having less value because they're less physically strong. And then I want to talk about caregiver stress, because most of your scenarios focus on the elder who is being abused, but we need to realize that the caregiver may be experiencing a lot of the same stresses, especially when we look about multiple identities, which you all look at, racism, sexism, anti-immigrant sentiment, all these things that the caregiver may him or herself be the target of some of those issues, and we're not going to enable the abuse, but we can actually be a bystander and be sympathetic to the caregiver and realize that he or she is struggling with a lot, and that maybe by intervening with the caregiver directly, that's just another form of bystander intervention. So it looks like we're catching up here. I think also we need to talk about vulnerability, that how we define vulnerability, and is it okay to be vulnerable, and what are the ways in which it's okay to be vulnerable. And if physical aging is one form of vulnerability, but if we live in a culture that denies vulnerability, I mean, all we have to do is look in the newspapers at the ads and in the magazines and on the television in Canada and the US, and it's like nobody's vulnerable. Everyone has their act together. Everyone's physically beautiful, however that's defined, which is not usually inclusive in the media. So there's a lot of deeper questions that define how we then approach the issue of aging that I think we need to examine. And actually, one of the things I really love about what you're all doing is that you're all approaching this as the problem is in me. It's not only out there. And I haven't really been to many conferences where the so-called helpers were defining themselves as part of the problem. So that's really very powerful and very, very good to see. Another thing we need to look at is protective and self-sacrificing parental values. And we see that all of these have a cultural component. But in general, to be a parent is to sacrifice yourself for your children. So that's a value or a virtue, but then that can become distorted or warped or misunderstood, and self-sacrificing can happen in a way that leads oneself to be more vulnerable in a negative way. So I think part of our intervention is to articulate some of these issues, like what does it mean to sacrifice for your children, and is this a way that is okay? So all of these are just things that came to my mind as I was dipping into what you're doing, and I thought I would just share them as kind of a larger framing of the issue. If we look at the caregiver issues, we can look at things like displacement of caregiver stress, lack of patience. That's another thing. We live in a very impatient culture. You know, now we have texting, we have social media, we want instantaneous results. So from a cultural point of view, to the extent that we cultivate impatience, which is something I see in the US a lot, you know, maybe you have it in Canada, to that extent then we become more impatient with someone who's having a difficulty being in their body. We can talk about a sense of entitlement or privilege, which we know we have to talk about when we deal with any issue of oppression, and how is that misunderstood by children. We can talk about the caregiver experience of prejudice or mistreatment, which, as I said, many of our caregivers in their other identities are themselves targets of something that increases their stress that then they may displace on an older person. And then this is a quote I took from one of your publications of the data, but that incidents are associated with feelings of frustration, anger, and despair on the part of the caregiver. So that means if I reach out as a bystander in a sympathetic, compassionate way to the caregiver and sympathize with those feelings, it doesn't mean and should not be allowed to mean or be interpreted that I'm sympathizing with the abusive behavior, but it's really sympathizing with, let's say, the existential dilemma of the person. And then if we remember that no one is born to be violent, and that the caregiver, her or himself, somewhere inside of themselves doesn't feel good about what they're doing, then I'm introducing cognitive dissonance by being sympathetic with their dilemma and offering help. So, just to let you know, the type is so small here, I'm having one of my own eye aging issues. So we can intervene compassionately and non-judgmentally with the caregiver without being enabling. And then, of course, we can talk about the context for bystander intervention, and we see that they are multiple. It's not only to prevent elder abuse, but it's to notice the warning signs, which you've discussed about, to interrupt inappropriate remarks and behaviors, including ageism and ableism, to support and empathize with caregivers, to address interrelated social justice issues, and as I said, I'm enlarging that to look at the colonialism issues that are part of our legacy in the Americas, and to undermine and contradict underlying cultural issues. So even when you see people, let's say, preoccupied with how they look, or with being physically fit, or advertisements in the newspaper that support these cultural values that then result in our being ageist, we can just make general introspective comments to the people we're with in those moments to think about what's being conveyed here. Key points is that bystanders are in a position to intervene, which is part of what you're all doing, and that individuals can be taught skills to intervene. And I think what I'm adding to the discussion is the thing about the misperception, that most people underestimate the willingness of their peers to intervene. So let's say we were doing one of your facilitated community workshops, and since we had all the clickers, I gave you a scenario. And I said, on a 1 to 5 scale, how comfortable would you be doing something? And then I said, on a 1 to 5 scale, how comfortable do you think most people in the room would be doing something? What we would find, usually, is that most people thought they were more comfortable to do something than other people. And then we know from the research that if you think people don't think it's okay to do something, you're less likely to do something. Because you're thinking, well, I don't want to be intrusive, or I don't want to overreact, and most of these people don't seem to think it's a problem. Well, that's an assumption that most of you all don't seem to think it's a problem. So if we, as part of this elder abuse work, let people know that most people think we should do X, Y, or Z, or most elders would want us to do X, Y, or Z, then we're correcting the misperception that inhibits people from intervening. So that's going to be a big theme in my talk. So why are people bystanders? You assume that it isn't a problem because you don't see anyone doing anything. You don't want to embarrass yourself or other people. That's very legitimate, right? All of these are legitimate. You assume that someone else will do something. You believe that others aren't bothered. You fear retaliation. And all of these together create what we call the bystander effect, where more people results in less help. Because you can see if you're thinking all these things and you're kind of looking around, you're less likely to act. So the question then becomes, how do we lower all these barriers? And one of the ways we lower these barriers is by doing what you're doing. The good news is that when you have a community of people who have a shared norm of intervening, then you have more people likely to intervene. So you have the reverse of the bystander effect. So that's really what you're trying to do. When we talk about social norms, it's an acceptability of a belief, and it's an unspoken rule. And as I said, perceptions of norms predict behavior. So for instance, look at alcohol use. When people think that other people drink more, they end up drinking more. When you think that when let's say young children think that high schoolers drink more than they really do, then when kids enter high school, they drink more. So you're conforming to a norm, but what you're conforming is to not what we call an actual norm, but a perceived norm. And the perceived norm has the power of effect. So I love this quote. For a norm to be real, it's not necessary for the majority to believe it, but only for the majority to believe that the majority believes it. Okay? So then we have to ask the question, what are the norms that support or inhibit elder abuse, and are they perceived correctly? And I think that what you would find is that a lot of these norms that you're trying to change are not necessarily actual norms, they're perceived norms, and that most people do care, most people want to intervene, most people are feeling uncomfortable. But they're kind of floating around not knowing what other people think or having the wrong idea of what other people think, and then not acting on what's in their heart, which is this theme of Beatrice's talk for this evening, is to come from the heart. So correcting misperceptions is just a big part of the larger picture. And we know that misperceptions inhibit bystander behavior. I'll give you an example from the sexual assault field where I work. And by the way, I forgot to say in the introduction, I've done a lot of work with the White Ribbon Campaign, and that's another great Canadian contribution to the world, so thank you. So most men would respect a man who intervened to prevent a sexual assault. But most men think that other men wouldn't respect you. They think it would be unmanly to intervene or to ruin someone's chances, or whatever slang you want to use. So if I'm in a situation where I could intervene to prevent a woman from being violated, and I really care about what other men think of me, which is part of how men are taught to think, that what other men think is more important than what women think. That's called sexism. If I'm taught that, then I'm kind of checking out the other guys to see how they would respond to me if I did something. And if I think that they wouldn't respect me, I'm less likely to do something. And if I know that they would respect me, so that's part of this issue, is identifying and correcting the misperceptions. And I want to just give you one example. First, I'll give you some terminology. So when you're in the majority, but you think you're in the minority, that's called pluralistic ignorance. So most men would respect a man who intervened to prevent a sexual assault, but most men think that most men would not respect a man. So the majority would respect someone, but they think they're in the minority. You got it? Now let's look at the reverse. Let's say I'm the kind of man that would tell an offensive joke around women or brag about my sexual exploits, and I think everyone thinks that's okay. I think the other guys like to have me say that stuff. But I'm really in the minority. They don't like it. You know, cartoons are great because or unless you're psychic, in a cartoon you would see like, I wish Alan wouldn't be telling me this. I don't want to listen to this. And you'd see like 9 people were thinking, I don't want to listen to him. And then everyone was thinking, but no one else seems to mind. So when I'm going on and on because I think you all like it, that's false consensus. I falsely think I'm in the majority, but I'm really in the minority. Now, what we know from a lot of research is people who engage in abusive behaviors. This has not been documented for elder abuse, but it's been documented for domestic violence and sexual assault perpetrators. People who engage in abusive behaviors think that what they're doing is okay. and that it's normal or justified, and they don't know that most people wouldn't be okay with what they were doing. So when you give normative feedback, you're doing two things at once. You're empowering the silent majority to act, and you're disempowering the beliefs of the abusive minority who think that other people think that what they're doing is okay. So here's my example. This is from a project in the US, and they were trying to reduce unwanted pregnancies in a middle school of all places, because girls were getting pregnant. So they decided to use this, what we call the social norms approach, and they asked young girls, by the end of 8th grade, how many girls do you think have had sexual intercourse? Well, we would probably all want the answer to be 0, right? But it isn't 0, because they're having unwanted pregnancies. So you see, if you look at the orange, that most girls thought, more than half of the girls thought that half or more of the girls had had sex by the end of 8th grade. So that's the perception. What people think about other people. Now I'm going to say something that you might not like. Only 22% had sex. I don't like saying only 22% either, because to me, 22% is like 22% too much. But it's only from the point of view of what people think. Now, if you look at those 8% who thought almost all had had sex, they were 10 times more likely to have sex. So that's the power of the misperception. The 8% of girls who thought that almost everyone had had sex were 10 times more likely to have had sex than the other girls. So we see that the perception becomes a reality. And it really influences people's behavior. And I could spend the whole day giving you all kinds of research. There's been a lot of other research done in the Commonwealth, by the way, not only the US, in case you don't, that doesn't carry weight with you. There's a lot of research in Canada and New Zealand and Australia about misperceptions of alcohol use. In Australia, they've done really good work around immigration issues, and it turns out most Australians are sympathetic of compassionate immigration policies, but most Australians think that most Australians are not. And then what happens is when you think you're in the minority, you go in the closet. You don't express what you're feeling. So this is the poster they came up with. Think about it. And they didn't want to put in a poster how many girls were having sex, so they gave what we call the injunctive norm, whether or not young people think it's okay for young people to have sex. And what they found in their surveys was that most young people thought that sex should be reserved for older adults in a married or committed relationship. So this is what we call a social norms marketing campaign, where we market the healthy, true norm to the community so the community knows about itself. And one of these things we need to always be thinking about, which you are thinking about it because you're trying to take a pan-Canadian approach, is that we have many different communities with many different norms, with many different ways of looking at the world. And one of the really great things about the social norms approach is it's feeding back the health of the community to itself. It's not imposing anything. And especially when you look at marginalized communities which have been taught to not feel good about themselves or mistreated, feeding back healthy norms of the community is really wonderful because it's like the good news isn't getting attention, so we're putting attention on the good news. So then the question would be to ask ourselves, what misperceptions might be relevant to elder abuse? So these are just hypothetical, but maybe that could be part of your research agenda now that you don't have any funding. Right? When someone would want you to intervene on their behalf. So we could ask elders, if this and this happened, would you want somebody to say something to you? And probably you'd get 100% say yes. So then we have a poster and it's basically telling me, Alan, you're seeing this and this person wants you to talk to them. Which is what you're doing anyway through your scenarios. It's just another tool that reinforces what you're already doing. Whether someone who intervenes should be respected or supported. What kind of recompense is appropriate for a caregiver? So we could say 85% of the people who live in London, Ontario believe that a caregiver is entitled to the following whatever. And then you're norming what is, let's say, appropriate support for your sacrifice. If the problem is over or underestimated, and if abuser attitudes are shared by the community. So now let's move on and talk about misperceptions and bystander behavior, because we know that most people are bothered, but don't think that most people are bothered. This is true for homophobia, for sexism, for racism, for alcohol abuse, for any kind of situation in which you might feel concerned. People underestimate others' concern. And in general, this is an interesting question about human beings. We overestimate the negative and we underestimate the positive. Now, isn't that interesting? We don't give each other enough credit. We don't believe enough in ourselves and each other to know that most people would want to do the right thing. Intervention is more likely when others are perceived as willing to intervene, so that's what you're trying to create. You're trying to create a culture in which people are comfortable intervening in some way according to what is appropriate for them individually and culturally, and according to the social situation. We're not saying you always have to do this. I don't think anyone ever has a right to say that to anyone. We could say, here are some things you could do in this situation, and hopefully we give enough things that people will feel comfortable. So in a few moments, I'm going to go through how I break down the bystander issue in terms of intervention skills and options. And as I said, the problem individuals use the misperception to justify their behavior. So let's say you have a group of individuals who are the most heavy drinking group in your community in terms of alcohol use or potted plants, right? In some of your southern neighbors, it's becoming legal in the states, some of our states in the US, so it's creating some interesting dilemmas. But at least it would be legal to have the potted plant. So among the heavy drinkers, they know that they drink more than, quote, everyone else. But if you survey them, they think that their group drinks more than it really does. And then if you confront them, they use the misperception to say, well, what's your problem? I saw you at the bar on Tuesday night, and I saw you on Thursday night, and I saw you on Friday night. And it's like, Alan, you were there all 4 nights. We were only there 1 night. Okay? But in other words, there's a whole cognitive distortion in the mind of the abuser that they justify what they're doing as being normal or okay with most people. And we need to take away that excuse. That excuse is not excusable. So we take it away by telling people the truth about themselves. And imagine we were doing this right here in a workshop, and you were one of those problematic people. And right there in the screen, you saw that most folks are not okay with what you think or do. That's powerful. So it just, as I said, it's another tool. I don't believe that any one tool is the answer. There is no one answer. There are multiple tools that we put together in what I call a mutually reinforcing synergistic way, so that they are stronger together than apart. I'm really sorry I don't have more time to invite comments and questions, but one of the advantages of the way this conference has been structured is that we will have the opportunity to do that over the course of the next 2 days. So if some questions come up for you, or you don't agree with something I'm saying, or you think it's very un-Canadian, it's very un-Canadian what I'm about to say, then you tell me, okay? So let's go on and talk about how to respond. And you've already done a lot of thinking of this. What I've come up with is that you can respond directly or indirectly, which means you could talk to the person who's receiving, the problem, the elder, or you could talk to the other bystanders. So let's say in some of your scenarios, the woman has a bruise on her face. You could say to the neighbor, did you see Mary had a bruise on her cheek? I wonder what happened. Or did you see the grandson run out of the house in a big rush? So what you do is you engage other people's concern by talking to them about what you've witnessed as a bystander. That's direct or indirect. You can do it now or later. Obviously, if someone's in danger of physical harm, you intervene now, but even then you might have a few minutes to just say to someone, do you see that? Or what should we do? Then the question is, how do you intervene? At least where I grew up, which is in New York State, we think of the word intervention has a very confrontational tone to it. So right away, people don't want to talk about intervention. And the way we think of intervention is confrontation. which is one form of intervention. But then we can intervene in a way that's indirect, which is to change the subject, to create a distraction. Maybe someone in the US makes a negative comments about Canadians, and I say, that's interesting because I was just at one of the most progressive conferences I've ever attended in my life in Canada. So I'm not arguing with them. They're proposing negative information about Canada, and I'm contradicting it with a positive statement that is non-confrontational. That's what we call an indirect intervention. So that's very powerful when you hear ageist or ableist remarks. You know, somebody's maybe talking about dyeing your hair or something, and you say, wow, some of the most beautiful people I know have gray hair. Which I believe personally. It took me... My mother's 89, and she dyed her hair for a long time, and I kept trying to convince her to not dye her hair, but I'm kind of like the rebel in the family, so they don't listen to me. They just... One day she said about the two of us, she said, I'm not going to try and understand you two anymore. So then she stopped dyeing her hair, and everyone's telling her how beautiful she is. She's really more beautiful with her beautiful gray hair. So you can make comments that contradict the remark without confronting the person. Then you can do what we call have a conversation, which a lot of your scenarios are openers to. You could say, can you tell me why you feel that way? Or it seems that this really bothers you. I wonder why you feel so strongly about this. And you open up the door to a conversation with the person, and we call that shifting attitudes, because when you're like filled up, you don't have room for anything new. But if you listen to someone and they let some stuff out, then they have room to take something in. So I'll go through these a little more if I have time. I still have a green light. Okay. So let's put it together. You can respond or not. This is important. Sometimes you might decide to not respond. If you respond, do you respond now or later? If you respond now or later, do you do it to the offender or to the other bystanders? If you respond to the offender, which of these skills do you use? If you respond to other bystanders, you ask people, how do you feel about this? Do you think we should do something? Would you support me if I did something? Or maybe someone else is the best person to talk to the person. And sometimes, if there's a target, you can empathize with the person that's being mistreated. And then after you talk to all the bystanders, you can make a plan and do something. Now, what I think is important is it can go the other way. So you intervene with someone, and then you ask the other bystanders, Margaret, what do you think of that? How'd I do? And I always do this at the airport, because I'm in the airport a lot. So look on my website, I have videos, and a lot of my stories are airport stories. So I was waiting on the line to get on the plane, and someone's talking so loud. So my wife knows that that's one of my triggers. So I go up really nice, and I say, excuse me, do you realize everyone can hear you? And most people go, I'm sorry. So then the guy next to me gives me like a high five. And I says, what do you think of what I did? He says, I can't stand it when people do that. And I said, well, how did you think I handled it? Oh, you were really nice. And then he said, it's much better than just standing there getting more and more frustrated and angry. So you see how I did a double intervention. I intervened with the loud person, but then I had a conversation with the other bystander about the intervention, which in a sense was teaching them that they could do what I did and not be afraid of upsetting someone. One time someone, most of the times people are like, I'm sorry. Once or twice people were like, well, I don't care. And then they started talking really soft anyway. So you see how it goes both ways. That's the point here. So as we know, confrontation is you tell someone you shouldn't be doing that. There's some of you in law enforcement here. I don't know if you're victim advocates or some of you are cops. A cop will confront you and say, I'm going to give you a ticket if you do that, or you're going to tell your child, if you do that again, you're not going out Friday night. A confrontation is either imposing consequences or expressing feelings. This really upsets me because now, sometimes it's really good to express feelings for your own benefit, right? It's part of your healing process to get really angry. That's fine. It may or may not be effective, But if it's part of your healing process, then it's good to express your feelings. And sometimes if the person cares about you, they take your feelings seriously. The indirect interventions is you can change the subject, right? So someone's talking about something and you either don't participate or you just completely change the subject. Some people feel that's a cop-out. Like if I'm saying offensive things about women and someone just completely changes the subject and starts talking about a hockey game, some people would say that's a cop-out, but then what happens is since no one wanted to be listening to me, they all start talking about the hockey game and I'm just standing there with no one to talk to. So even changing the subject, or as I said, you can replace a positive remark with a negative. So maybe somebody complains that, too many women are being hired because of affirmative action. And I say, well, actually, my three best biology professors in colleges were women. If somebody complains that they just hired another female professor who didn't deserve, I don't necessarily confront them and say, you know what I could say if I was confronting them. I wouldn't have to be nice, but I could just say, that's really interesting because my three best professors were women. So you're contradicting the assumption, or you could have a conversation, which is what we call shifting attitudes. And you could say, could you tell me why you feel that way? It sounds like you're really bothered by the amount of women professors. Like, I'd like to understand that. And then you kind of let the person talk, and then as they talk in a really gentle, non-confrontational way, I'll say, oh, now I understand why you're really upset. I'll give you one quick example. So I don't know if you have this horrible expression in Canada, but in the US, there's this expression where if somebody feels victimized, they say, that person raped me. Okay, I'm glad you don't have it. So let's take a scenario. So I'm a college student, and I come back from an exam, and I feel it was a really bad exam. And it was unfair, and I didn't do well. And I say, that professor raped me. So you can say, Alan, I don't want to ever hear you use that word like that again, because I know people who are raped, and it's not the same. That's a confrontation. You can change the subject and say, I have 3 exams next week. I don't even know how I'm going to pass them. Or you could say, could you tell me what you mean? Oh, that test was so unfair, blah, blah, blah. I studied. The professor said these things would be on the test. It was really this. And you go, wow, I would be upset too. I would be upset if I really studied hard for a test and the test had different questions than I had studied for. I could totally understand how you feel. And now the person is venting, and at the end I say, but I'm curious, why did you use the word rape? Well, I just felt like a victim. Well, maybe it isn't the same. I totally understand how you feel, but the next time I would just say a different word. So that's what we call shifting attitudes. Don't do that with someone who is very toxic, who has a lot of negativity to vent, because then you just get dumped on. But you can engage some people in a really deeper conversation this way. So I want to quickly go through some case studies of how we're applying this. And this is from a university in the US that is using the social norms approach to address high-risk drinking and sexual assault in fraternities and sororities. And they have all these different components of their program. So they collect perception data. They share the results in workshops. So like you do workshops in the community, you could give the community information about itself. They have a media campaign. They have a bystander video contest where different sororities and fraternities make up a video about a bystander intervening, and then they give one a prize, which I think is really nice, because then you and your friends have to think about, well, what's the scenario? How would we intervene? Who's going to do the intervention? And then they also do this for sexual assault. So they collect data about alcohol use. And this is really interesting, as I said, when you would want someone to intervene on your behalf. So we could ask our elders this. Would you want someone to do something if the following was happening? Someone was spending your money without your permission. Someone was abusing your property. Someone was physical with you. And it's also a preventive intervention, because then you're preparing people mentally for the possibility that this could happen. How much am I bothered by risky situations? So here's an example. So pretend now this is a group of men who belong to you have fraternities and sororities in Canada? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about? So pretend that we're all a group of men in a fraternity, and now I'm doing a workshop, and I'm telling you what you told us. So he said, how much does the following bother you? Noticing an intoxicated chapter member harassing or bothering someone. And if you look at the very much, you see that in reality, 71% are bothered very much, but only 38% think that most people are bothered. So that's the gap we're talking about, the perception gap. Then here's another one for sorority. This is where you ask the people what they would want you to do. 100% of my sisters said that they would want another person to step in when I'm drinking too much, step in if I'm drinking to the point of putting myself in danger. Okay, so you get the idea. That we're norming the fact that most people want us to help them in certain situations. And we're norming the fact that most people are engaging in more healthy ways than we thought. So then this is their poster. So they have a media campaign, and this, there's some brochures on the table about social marketing campaigns. A social marketing campaign is when you market a message. So the posters you have on elder abuse are social marketing posters because they're marketing a norm or an attitude. But a social norms marketing is telling the percentage, what people actually think. It is marketing the actual norm. It's very difficult to do this, and we don't have time to go into this, but you have to realize you're contradicting what people believe. You're telling them that something they think isn't true, so they push back. They tell you, we don't believe you, people lied on your survey. They have a zillion reasons why they don't want to believe what you're saying. So then the whole process is to have conversations. Well, why don't you believe the data? What makes you think that people would lie in the survey? How could we do the survey in a way that people wouldn't lie? And there's like a whole process. So what happens with the social norms approach, it's so intuitively obvious when people get it. It's like, aha, they want to run out and do it, but it's easier said than done. But there's a lot of literature now in the US that this is a very powerful tool for dealing with violence issues, and it's gaining a lot of traction with violence against women. It's already been very scientifically proven experiment control design, with alcohol, with seatbelt use, with green behaviors, using, look, I'll be honest, because I stay in a lot of motels. When I stay in a hotel or motel and in the bathroom there's this card is that we really care about the environment and we want to make the world a better place, I don't believe them. They want to save money on their laundry bill. That's okay. But, I don't believe that these big international hotel chains are maybe I should, but I don't believe they care that much about the world. But if you put a card in my room that says, X% of people in this hotel recycle their towels, I'll be more likely to recycle my towels. Because going back to this as a conference about human beings, we care about each other as human beings. So if we think we're all worse than we really are, our caring won't be as effective as if we know how beautiful and wonderful we all are and that most of us want to do the right thing. So this is just from a social norms campaign at a university in the US. Just to give you another example, Florida State. 9 out of 10 men would do something to help women they saw being mistreated. This is from a high school where we did a social norms campaign and we asked the kids what they thought were the characteristics of a healthy relationship. And so it says X% of you thought the following. So imagine if we somehow created a message like this about elder care. 97% of Torontoans, is that how you say? Close? Okay, close enough from the US, someone from the US. 98% of Torontons respect their elders because, and then you have the list. That would be really beautiful, right? Now, if it turns out that you ask a question that you don't get a good number, then you can't use it, right? So you see how you have to really put some thought into what questions you ask. Because we know, I'm talking about norms that are under or overestimated that are actually healthy, but we also know that there are norms that are unhealthy. But correcting the misperceived norms is a way of ultimately changing the unhealthy norms. So there's a whole science to this. So I wrote a book on this. It's out on the counter. A lot of this material is from the book. And then I wanted to share with you a poster that's from Toronto that many of you may have seen from the Toronto Friendship Center, which was a series of posters developed by Men Can Stop Rape in the U.S. about Aboriginal violence in the family issues. And I really love this poster because he says, "I choose a good life with her." And then I can't read in the bottom, but it says, "Your actions can end violence against Aboriginal women." And you could see that just as you've all spent so much effort adapting your scenarios to your Quebecois population, and you can't just put the French words in, because it's not only the words, it's how people use the words and what the situations are, so it has to be relevant or tailored to the group. You have to do that with your social marketing or social norms marketing. And the way this was explained to me is the drumbeat is like the heart of life. Like the heart of Mother Nature is pulsing. And if we are in tune with the heart of Mother Nature, we would never be violent to another human being. So there's like deeper layers of this message. So this is a social marketing poster. But we could imagine then, let's say we did this according to different tribal communities. You know, X% of members of the Mohawk Nation, or Akwesasne, is what I should have said. You know, that then it becomes really closer to home because it's my community, it's about my community that feels this way. So just in conclusion, it's yellow now. You can be in tune, right? You can be in tune with the drumbeat of life, going with the theme of the poster. And then, as I said, I just want to thank you all for your wonderful work. Both of us really, as I said, are honored with a you to be here. And to remind you that you have the personal you power because of who you are and who you want to be. So thank you all very much.
Okay, so we are going to have a chance to talk about what just came up for you there. But before we do that, I wanted to invite our evaluation team to come forward to talk a bit about the evaluation process for the project and also how we're going to carry that on through today. So again, I'd like to introduce you to Ben Cottle. He's a social psychologist, and he's been spending 15 years figuring out what it takes to help people to do work that is both personally fulfilling and materially successful. He's on a personal mission to convert all the energy that is currently wasted on fear, doubt, confusion, and conflict into productive energy, moving people towards goals that really matter. All right. He's also a founding partner of Emotus Operandi, and he just moved to Pender Island. I've always wanted to live on a Gulf island. And I also wanted to introduce to you April Struthers. April is a free-ranging consultant. I always have this vision of a chicken. Every time she says it. An organic chicken. And she works on projects that are contributing to interpersonal and social change, particularly for the prevention of interpersonal violence. She's been very involved in writing national publications under the Public Health Agency of Canada's Federal Elder Abuse Initiative on promising approaches to addressing abuse and neglect in mainstream and also Aboriginal communities. And she is the developer, along with Lindsay Neufeld, of the Being Least Intrusive tool for intervening. So over to you two. Welcome.
How do we just click this to advance things?
So we need to switch the slides to Ben. Yeah.
This morning we actually are going to talk very briefly and generally about a developmental approach to evaluations. We're not actually going to get into any of the results of the evaluation today. We'll do that tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll talk a little bit about facts and figures and some of the stats that we're collecting. But today what we really wanted to do was really to contextualize the days that we have together here. One of the major differences in a developmental approach to evaluation from conventional evaluations is that the focus is on learning. The focus is, the developmental part of it is to use constant feedback throughout the project to improve the results of the project. So really what we're hoping to do today is to or through these 3 days is to carry that developmental spirit throughout this time together. As part of that, what we want to do is, as soon as we get a slide. Okay, so the real goal for the developmental evaluation and as part of the learning process is simply to compare our expectations with our experiences and to see what we can do. There we go. How do I get it to? This one? Not that one. This one. Aha. There we go. So the learning process is really quite simple, and what we're trying to do through an evaluation is we're trying to create this sort of Venn diagram where we're comparing our expectations for how things should work with our experience of how things actually work. So we're gathering data to create a feedback loop where we can actually get some sense of how things are working. As Alan was talking about, our perceptions and the reality are not always the same. And by bringing those into a juxtaposition with each other, we can often learn quite significant things. So what we want to do is, through our time together throughout the next 2 days, is we want to be proactive about making sure that we're creating those opportunities where we can reflect on our experiences. And Allison and Margaret have created different discussion points throughout the day. So after there's a presentation, there'll be some provocative questions. And in that process, we're going to create more opportunities where we can actually sort of get some ideas up, talk through them a little bit, and then we're going to be using the tables off on the side as a way of processing and recording some of the best ideas that are floating to the surface.
So we have a series of questions for you, and actually anybody that knows me knows I'm an inveterate questioner. And in my job, my curiosity gets to be woven in with experiences in projects like this, so it's very satisfying for me. Kind of questions that I like to ask are, what's going on? What do we expect? And certainly in evaluations, that's what you ask, and we're asking that today. What expectations did you come with? What assumptions are you making right now? What assumptions have you brought here? What did you experience? This is an experiential kind of gathering, and that makes it a little more chaotic, but also more exciting than some other formats for coming together. So, what did you experience in your relationship with this project to this point and over these 2 days? What was surprising? Was anything confirmed for you, or were you completely challenged by the way that things went? Where were your sources of support, and what do you know now? So we're asking that you join your experience to sort of our questions by periodically through the day visiting the station over here on the right. We're going to ask there, what are you noticing? What's coming up right now? What are some aha moments, if you're having any? What are some nagging questions? If you're confused, that's probably good. A little cognitive dissonance goes a long way, as Alan would tell you. And so we're hoping that we will grab onto ideas and what's emerging as you think through things and as you are presented with a variety both of concepts and of experiences through this project and the ideas that we're trying to merge. We're really interested in finding out what's going on under the surface. And as you bring us your ideas, we will try to see if there's patterns. There's always patterns. The thing is to find them and to articulate them and to check that that's what's actually going on. So what are some of the themes? What are some of the patterns that you notice? What's been replicated? What keeps coming up? And, of course, so what? So what if we have all this information? So what if we identify the themes, the patterns? So what if some things are confirmed for you? How do we use this information to do better work as we go forward? Now, what you're bringing to us with your ideas and your expectations and so on, we're going to get some of that organized into themes, and probably some of it will go into the final report. And it's very good to be able to show funders that people have been thinking through this stuff all the way through, and that we're still thinking, and that from our initial thinking we've learned a platform, and then we're adding to that, and at this point we think a little differently and a little more completely, maybe. That's a good thing to be able to show, but it also means there's something to carry forward for the next project, the next series of projects, or for you to inject back into your work lives in the work that you do across this country, really.
I think adding on to that too, the final report, there's no report drafted at this point, in large part because as evaluators, what we can do is kind of hold a mirror up to what you're doing. But you're the ones with the knowledge, you're the ones with the information, you're the ones with the answers to all the questions. All we can do is ask the questions and then help to sort of organize those answers. So one of the prime purposes of us being here, of me being here today, is to be able to interact with you around some of the data, some of the preliminary facts and figures that we have, to get from you what's most important in that. I can tell you what the statistical, results are, but I need you to tell me what matters, what's actually interesting. So throughout the space of the next 2 days, I'm going to be gathering a lot of information from you so that we can craft that into the final report, so that we can actually make the evaluation as useful as possible for moving this work forward, for documenting the successes that we're having, and then also for gleaning where are the next steps, where are the places for it to evolve. And with that then, Allison and Margaret have the first discussion question to get the ball rolling.
So you'll notice throughout the day we're going to have a slide that looks like this, catching hold of inspired ideas. And so we just heard a lot of very thoughtful comments from Alan about his work and how it might apply in our settings. So for our first question, where did it go? So our first question for you to consider at your tables for about the next 15 minutes is, from Alan's talk, what are the new ideas for you? So have a conversation for 12, 14 minutes, and then if we don't have sticky notes on your table already, we will be circulating to provide those. So have the conversation first, and then if there are some things that come up in the conversation that are questions, new learnings, new understandings, that's the kind of stuff that we'd like to have you take over to Ben and April to start organizing on the brown flip chart paper over to my right. Okay, so 10 to 12 minutes, 12 minutes or so from Alan's talk. What are the new ideas for you? phones here, really. There's not another clock in here, right?
No, that's it. Yeah, share what they are talking about or whatever.
Hi, everybody. Believe it or not, that was 15 minutes. So actually, with all our concern about time, at this moment, we have like about 10 minutes. So we just wanted to give people an opportunity, if there were things that you wanted to comment on from what you've been hearing and thinking and learning about so far. There is a mic at the back, if you could use that. Just anything that you might like to share or comment on at this point. And don't be shy.
80% of people want to share at the mic.
I told Margaret you did.
The other thing is we're really hoping that this is a conversation that will continue right across the 2 days. So we'll have long breaks where you can have the conversations, and also you have to visit the table. Does anybody want to share something? Look at, excellent.
Ta-da! They just needed a bit of time to think about it.
In the minority. We were talking a little bit about would it be possible to develop the questions that we could roll across the country to help populate social norm posters. So even if we could develop very clear questions to ask older adults and then get the data. And it is true, we might get the wrong answers, but that also might be illuminating as to, are we as far along in our work locally as we think that we are? And it might help inform what comes next.
Interesting idea. Thank you.
We had some interesting conversation at our table, and we just wanted to make a couple of key points that really stuck with us. Is no one is born to be violent. So we wondered about what if we started a social campaign that men are not inherently violent, and that would be very revolutionary, because the entire world is organized to believe, huge machinery of militarism and industry, to believe that men are inherently violent. And so what if there was a huge world campaign that men are not inherently violent? And then I think the other thing we wanted to say is that, that it really stuck with us, that our understanding and responses have to be placed within a relational, cultural context, appreciating and understanding the complexities that families and family systems bring with them, and that there are not good people and bad people, but people who are struggling to love each other within these messy, mucky family systems. So trying to figure out how to place ourselves within that context with empathy and understanding.
No, I think good job.
Thank you.
I have nothing to say, I'm just here.
What?
Good morning. There's a couple of points from our table which I think were very important. One was the idea of how can we develop these posters, if you will, and campaigns to hit on a local level. So it could say, this many folks in, well, Lindsay was the one community that was represented at my table, this many folks in Lindsay actually think this way. And the idea of really reinforcing the positive rather than reinstating the negative, so that rather than saying, you shall not do this, nurturing the idea that, no, you think this way, you're actually in the majority that you think this way, and how that could be used in campaigns around sexual violence, domestic violence, and certainly with the elder abuse. We also talked about, and this was out of Alan's talk, I was really very pleased to hear because of my background, of that association with ageism and ableism, as how we are, those of us with disabilities are valued a certain way in our society as we age, as we become less temporarily abled in different ways, how that then our perception of ourselves and our perception of society that society has of us is very different. And finally, we talked about how it would be interesting with certain ideas to actually know what do people really think rather than what we hear in the media or a few online postings and things like that. And we used 2 examples from our table that we were talking about. One was with Sisters in the Spirit, Missing and Murdered Aboriginal Women. It appears that folks really do not care, with the exception, and particularly in the government, but is that the reality, and to have that polling? Or the other idea, the other thing that would be interesting to see, we've seen with the Baltimore uprising, we've seen a lot of very negative imaging and negative commentators, not just with Fox News and things like that, but what's the reality? How do people really perceive their community, and how do people really perceive that uprising? So those were just a few things,
Wow.
and we were still talking about it. Okay, thank you.
Wow.
Wow. This is a thinking, happening group. Thank you.
Okay, first I'm going to apologize because I've lost my voice.
Oh dear,
But
oh my goodness.
I do want to say that at our table we talked about engaging younger people to change that social norm, and that we have to start at a young age. And then we got talking about campaigns, and Friday we just finalized our campaign around seniors, a social media campaign, but it's based on Manitoba, so I don't take all the credit. Is anybody from Manitoba here? Is Dora here? Hey, Dora. So we took Dora's idea from Manitoba, and they've been so good to share. But in taking that and looking at it from an Ontario perspective, we started a challenge called Selfie with a Senior Challenge. So we're engaging younger children and people of all ages to start restoring respect of seniors and taking a picture with a senior. It doesn't matter where you are, grandparents, someone that's, got the gray hair is beautiful to you. So we just finalized this on Friday, so it will be up on our social media campaigns. But Manitoba has an excellent respect challenge as well. So I encourage other provinces and territories that are here to undertake similar kind of initiatives, because I think it really does make a difference. Thank you.
It's great.
Wow, thank you. Wow, your poor voice.
Rayanne's one of our keynotes tomorrow. That's it, Rayanne. No more questions for you. Anything else?
Anything else?
I love the idea of personalizing this, right? Like taking it into each of the question about what's it like in Lindsay, what's it like here? Like, boy, that's a pan-Canadian grassroots conversation, isn't it? That would be very productive.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
And the focus on the positive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So are you ready for a coffee break? So half an hour, please take your inspired ideas.
Okay, wait.
What's happening?
Wait.
Had insisted I come and mention this. As an older adult, the one thing that stood out to me is one of the values as parents we have is self-sacrificing. And so that puts us at risk, I think, for abuse. So that struck at our table.
That's great.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to. It's very blinding up here,
Yeah,
actually. It's
yeah.
hard to see what's going on back
This
there.
is what it's like when you have the paparazzi, I'm sure, following you. Yes, sorry. Make sure. Oh,
Exactly.
thank you, Marianne.
Exactly. Yeah.
I also wanted to say that 85% of people in the room want to sit at a new table with people they don't know when they come back from the break.
So have a great break, and don't forget to visit the table over here. There's stickies over there for inspired ideas.
Go. Great. I want to have a look at what's coming up. I need to look at the